My name is Heather Young, and I'm 23 years old. Last Christmas, my twin sister got a brand new Tesla gleaming in the driveway with a giant red bow. Me, I got a chipped piggy bank from a discount store with $13 inside. My dad grinned. That's our contribution to your future home. Heather. I stood there, my heart sinking as my sister squealed and snapped selfies with her car. That night, I packed my bags, walked out the door, and didn't look back. Then my phone buzzed a text from my mom. Don't forget to pay the rent. I froze. After everything I had sacrificed for them, the first thing they thought about was asking me to cover the bills. That was the moment I knew I had to close that chapter for good. What happened next went far beyond anything I could have imagined. Everything shifted so fast that even I could hardly believe it was real. If you want to know how that twist changed my life forever, hit that subscribe button and join me for the full. If you want to understand this story, we have to go back to when I had just turned 18, a time when my twin sister and I felt like we were at the very top of our lives. We'd both gotten into college, me for business, her for marketing. I could already picture myself in a dorm crunching numbers and planning a future. But that summer, our family's toy store in Memphis went under. Online stores like Amazon were selling everything cheaper, and our little shop couldn't compete. Overnight, we went from middle class to barely scraping by. Rent was late, groceries were sparse, and college tuition. Forget it. Mom and Dad called us into the living room one evening. Their eyes were tired, like they'd been up all night arguing. We can only send one of you to college. Dad said, his voice heavy. Mom looked at my sister, then at me. Heather, you're the responsible one. You can work, help us keep the house. Your sister needs this chance to shine. My stomach dropped. Responsible. That's what they thought of me, the one who could just give up her dreams. I looked at my sister, her face lit up with hope, and I couldn't take that away. So I nodded. Fine. I'll stay. I gave up college before I even unpacked my bags. Instead, I took a job as a financial data entry clerk at a small shipping company downtown. It wasn't glamorous, typing invoices, logging payments, staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned. The pay was barely enough, but I used it to cover our bills: electricity, water, internet. I'd drag myself home after 10-hour shifts, only to hear Mom raving about my sister's new campus life, or Dad boasting about her perfect grades. It hurt, but I told myself I was doing the right thing. Family came first, right? Things got tougher the next year. The debts from the store kept growing: bank loans, credit cards, unpaid vendors. Dad's voice shook when he said we might lose the house. So I started funneling more of my paycheck to them. $100 for the mortgage, $50 for the utilities. Soon, I was giving them almost everything I earned. I stopped going out, didn't buy new clothes, didn't even think about saving for myself. My life was work bills and keeping us afloat. My sister, though, she was living it up. New outfits, weekend trips with friends, fancy lattes. She posted it all on social media. I'd see her photos late at night, a tight knot forming in my chest. Mom would say, she's making us proud, Heather. You're helping her get there. Helping her. What about my dreams? But I bit my tongue and kept going. That's when I met Daniel, my boyfriend. He worked at a coffee shop near my office, always sneaking me a free drink when I looked like I was about to collapse. We'd chat during my breaks, and he'd listen when I poured out my frustrations about home. He had this way of making me feel seen, like I wasn't just a machine paying the family's bills. He was studying interior design, always sketching ideas on napkins, and his passion gave me a spark of hope. By the time I was 21, I'd paid off most of the family's debts. I'd worked hard, taken online courses for bookkeeping, and gotten promoted to financial assistant at the company. The extra money helped, and I thought things might turn around. Maybe Mom and Dad would see what I'd sacrificed. Maybe they'd thank me. Maybe they'd even help me go back to school. But deep down, I knew it was a long shot. They never asked how I was holding up, never noticed the bags under my eyes. To them, I was just the one who fixed things, the one who didn't need anything. Looking back, I was naive. I gave up my future for a family that took it for granted. I thought I was being strong, but I was setting myself up for the betrayal that was coming. A couple of years after I started working, things began to look up, at least for me. I'd thrown myself into my job at the shipping company, learning every trick of the trade. I took online courses in bookkeeping on the side, staying up late to study after long shifts. My hard work paid off when I got promoted to financial assistant by my early 20s. The raise wasn't huge, but it felt like a lifeline. I was proud, thinking maybe now my family would see what I was capable of. With the extra money, I did more than just cover bills. I started investing small amounts in a local business, a friend's startup that was doing well. It wasn't much at first, a few $100s here and there, but it grew. By the time I was 22, I'd made enough to help Mom and Dad clear the last of their debts from the toy store. I handed over thousands of dollars to pay off their final loan, thinking it would save our family home. I'd lie awake at night imagining them sitting me down saying, "Heather, we couldn't have done this without you." But that never happened. Instead, Mom and Dad acted like it was no big deal. "Thanks, Heather," Mom would say, barely looking up from her phone. Dad would nod, then go back to talking about my sister's latest achievements. Lindsay was still in college, living her best life. She'd come home for breaks with new clothes, a shiny new phone, even a fancy laptop, all paid for by Mom and Dad. I'd see her posts online showing off designer bags or trips to Miami with her friends. Each photo was like a punch to the gut. I was the one keeping the lights on, but she was the one they bragged about. I tried to brush it off. I told myself it was fine that I was doing this for all of us. But the unfairness started to eat at me. One evening, I was at the kitchen table going over our family's budget to make sure we wouldn't miss another payment. Mom walked in, saw me with my spreadsheets, and said, "Oh, Heather, you're so good at this stuff. Can you send Lindsay some extra cash? She needs it for a new outfit for her internship interview." I stared at her, waiting for a please, or even a thank you for everything I'd done. Nothing. Just a smile, like it was my job to keep funding Lindsay's life. Dad was no better. He'd come home from his new job at a hardware store and talk endlessly about Lindsay's marketing projects, or how she was destined for greatness. Once I tried to share my own news. I'd gotten a bonus at work for catching a major error in the company's accounts. I thought maybe he'd be proud, but he just said, "That's nice, Heather. Did you hear Lindsay got picked for a study abroad program?" My heart sank. It was like I was invisible unless they needed money. Daniel, my boyfriend, saw it all. We'd been together for a while by then, and he'd become my rock. He was still working at the coffee shop, but had started taking on freelance interior design projects, sketching beautiful spaces that made me dream of something bigger. One night, over cheap takeout at his apartment, I vented about how my family treated me. "Heather," he said, his eyes serious, "you're killing yourself for them, and they don't even see it. You deserve better." His words hit hard, but I wasn't ready to admit he was right. I still believed things could change. I started hoping the holidays would be different. Christmas was coming up, and I thought maybe Mom and Dad would show some gratitude. I'd given up my education, my social life, everything to pull our family out of debt. I'd even started putting money into a joint account with them, thinking we could rebuild together. Surely they'd see that. Surely they'd do something to make me feel valued. I wasn't asking for much, just a sign that I mattered as much as Lindsay did. But deep down, a part of me knew I was hoping for too much. Every time I walked into the house, I felt like the help, not their daughter. Mom would ask for money for emergencies that always seemed to involve Lindsay's wants. Dad would pat my shoulder and say, "You're our rock, Heather," but it felt hollow. I'd go to bed exhausted, wondering if this was all my life would ever be, working, giving, and getting nothing back. That Christmas, I walked into our Memphis home with a flicker of hope. The house was decked out, twinkling lights, a towering tree, the smell of Mom's cinnamon rolls filling the air. For once, I thought maybe my family would show they appreciated me. I'd spent years keeping us afloat, pulling us out of debt, and I wasn't asking for much, just a sign that I mattered. But what happened that day shattered any illusions I had left. The living room was packed with relatives, everyone buzzing with holiday cheer. Lindsay was the center of attention as usual, laughing and showing off her new phone. I sat quietly sipping hot cocoa waiting for the gift exchange. Mom and Dad always made a big show of it, handing out presents with dramatic flair. I watched as Lindsay tore into her first gift, a designer purse from Mom. She squealed, hugging Mom like she'd just won the lottery. "You guys are the best," she gushed. I forced a smile, telling myself it was fine. My turn would come. Then Dad called Lindsay outside, a mischievous grin on his face. "We've got something special for you," he said. Everyone followed, crowding onto the porch. There in the driveway was a sleek silver Tesla wrapped in a giant red bow. The crowd erupted in cheers. Lindsay screamed, jumping up and down, already pulling out her phone to snap selfies with the car. "Oh my gosh, a Tesla! You guys are insane!" she shouted, climbing into the driver's seat. Mom beamed, saying, "You deserve it, honey. You're our star." Dad nodded, clapping her on the back like she'd just graduated with honors. I stood frozen on the porch, my heart pounding in my ears. A Tesla, that car cost more than my entire year's salary. I'd been pouring every dime into our family, and they'd spent a fortune on Lindsay. My hands shook as I gripped my mug, trying to keep it together. Then Mom turned to me, holding out a small, poorly wrapped box. "Here, Heather," she said, her voice casual like an afterthought. I opened it. My fingers numb. Inside was a chipped ceramic piggy bank, the kind you'd find at a dollar store, with 13 crumpled dollar bills stuffed inside. The room went quiet, a few cousins exchanging awkward glances. Dad chuckled, breaking the silence. "That's our contribution to your future home, Heather. Gotta start somewhere, right?" His words hit like a slap. Contribution. I'd paid off their debts, kept the house running, and this was my reward. A cheap trinket and a mocking joke. Lindsay didn't even look up from her phone, too busy posting about her Tesla. I forced a tight smile, muttering thanks, but inside I was crumbling. Later that evening, after the guests left, I sat alone in the kitchen staring at the piggy bank. Something didn't add up. How could Mom and Dad afford a Tesla? Dad's job at the hardware store barely covered groceries, and Mom wasn't working. My mind raced, and a sick feeling settled in my stomach. I grabbed my laptop and logged into the joint account I'd set up with them, the one I'd been putting my investment earnings into, thinking we were rebuilding together. My breath caught as I scrolled through the transactions. A massive withdrawal, nearly $30,000, had been made a week ago, transferred to a car dealership. They'd used my money, my hard-earned savings, to buy Lindsay's Tesla. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. All those years of sacrifice, giving up college, working myself to the bone, they'd taken my money without even asking. I thought back to every time Mom asked for emergency funds, every time Dad called me their rock. It was all a lie. They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as a bank account. Lindsay's voice echoed from the living room, laughing about her new car, and it took everything in me not to storm in there and scream. I called Daniel, my hands trembling as I told him what I'd found. "They used my money, Daniel," I choked out. "Everything I worked for, they gave it to her." His voice was steady, calming me down. "Heather, you don't deserve this. You need to confront them." I knew he was right, but the thought of facing Mom and Dad made my stomach churn. I'd spent so long trying to hold our family together, but now I saw the truth: they'd never valued me. That night, I lay awake, the piggy bank sitting on my nightstand like a cruel reminder. My hope for a fair Christmas had been naive. I wasn't just hurt, I was done. Done being their ATM, done pretending everything was okay. I didn't know how I'd do it, but I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Something had to change, and it was going to start with me. A week after Christmas, I couldn't shake the betrayal. Finding out Mom and Dad had taken $30,000 of my savings to buy Lindsay a Tesla left me raw, like someone had ripped my heart out. I'd been living in their house, pouring every dime into keeping us afloat, and they'd used me like a bank. Daniel kept pushing me to stand up for myself, and I knew he was right. I couldn't keep swallowing their lies. When Mom announced a family dinner to ring in the new year, I decided it was time. I wasn't just going to confront them, I was going to make sure everyone saw who they really were. That night, our Memphis home was alive with relatives. The dining room was crowded plates piled with fried chicken and mashed potatoes, voices overlapping in cheerful chaos. Lindsay held court in the corner, bragging about her Tesla, her phone lighting up with likes on her latest posts. I moved through the room like a ghost, setting out napkins, my hands trembling with what I was about to do. Every time Mom smiled at me or Dad said, "Thanks, Heather," it felt like a knife twisting deeper. We sat down to eat, and I waited, my pulse hammering in my ears. The conversation flowed, cousins joking aunts, swapping gossip until there was a pause. I pushed my chair back, the screech, cutting through the noise. Everyone turned to me, forks hovering. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "I need to talk," I said, my voice louder than I expected. "For years, I've given up everything for this family. I skipped college so Lindsay could go. I worked myself ragged to pay off your debts, Mom, Dad. I put my savings into our joint account thinking we were in this together. But you stole $30,000 of my money to buy Lindsay a Tesla." I gestured toward the driveway where her car gleamed under the streetlight. The room went still, like the air had been sucked out. Mom's face flushed, her eyes darting to the relatives. "Heather, stop this nonsense." She snapped, her voice sharp. Dad coughed, staring at his plate. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," he mumbled. Lindsay scoffed, crossing her arms. "Seriously, Heather, you're so dramatic." "Get over yourself," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Dramatic? Carol, Robert, you've treated me like a cash machine for years. I paid your bills, your loans, and you gave me a chipped piggy bank as a joke. Lindsay, you got a free ride to college and a Tesla, all with my money. And you act like I owe you." I held up the bank statement. I'd printed the proof, glaring in black and white. $30,000 gone to a car dealership. You didn't even ask. Gasps rippled through the table. My uncle leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Carol, is this true?" he asked. Mom stammered, her hands shaking. It's family money." "We thought it was okay." Dad raised his voice, his face red. "Heather, you're blowing this out of proportion. Lindsay earned that car with her hard work." "Her hard work?" I shouted, my voice breaking. "I gave up my dreams for you. I lived here, worked myself to death, and you stole from me. I'm done. Done paying your bills, done cleaning up your messes. As of tonight, I'm out." I turned to Lindsay, her glare burning into me. "And you're on your own. Good luck with that Tesla without my cash." The room erupted. Mom burst into tears, clutching her napkin. "Heather, how could you humiliate us?" she sobbed. Dad stood, pointing at me. "You're ungrateful after everything we've done?" Lindsay shoved her chair back and stormed out the front door, slamming behind her. Relatives whispered, some looking shocked, others uncomfortable. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I was breathing. I marched to my room in their house where I'd spent years sacrificing, and started packing. I threw clothes, my laptop, a few photos into a suitcase, my hands moving on autopilot. Mom followed, her voice desperate. "Heather, please, we're family. Don't do this," she begged. I zipped my bag and faced her. "Carol, you stopped being my family when you chose Lindsay over me. I'm done." I pushed past her, ignoring her sobs. Dad was at the bottom of the stairs, his arms crossed. "If you leave, don't think you can come back," he said coldly. I met his eyes. "Robert, I won't need to. I'm done carrying you." I walked out the front door, the cold January air hitting my face, my heart pounding but steady. I drove to Daniel's apartment, my suitcase in the back seat. He was waiting, pulling me into a tight hug the moment I stepped inside. "You were so brave," he whispered. I sank into him, tears finally spilling over. "I don't know what's next," I admitted. He smiled, brushing my hair back. "We'll figure it out together." That night, I slept on his couch, exhausted but free. The next day, I logged into the joint account one last time. I transferred my remaining savings to my personal account, then closed the joint one for good. I blocked Mom, Dad, and Lindsay's numbers, cutting off their endless demands. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally my own person, ready to start over. In the weeks that followed my walkout, I felt like I was breathing for the first time in years. Living with Daniel in his small Memphis apartment was a fresh start, a chance to figure out who I was without the weight of my family's demands. His place wasn't fancy mismatched furniture, a leaky faucet, but it felt like home. For the first time, I wasn't waking up to Carol's requests for money or Robert's dismissive comments. I was free, but freedom came with its own challenges. I had my savings, but starting over wasn't easy. Daniel was my anchor. He'd been freelancing as an interior designer, sketching stunning layouts for local businesses, and his passion was contagious. One night over pizza on his worn-out couch, he handed me a sketch pad. "You've got an eye for detail, Heather," he said. "Why not try designing with me? You could be great at it." I laughed, brushing it off. I'd spent years crunching numbers, not creating. But he insisted, showing me the basics: color palettes, furniture, layouts, mood boards. I was hooked. For the first time since giving up college, I felt like I was learning something for me. I dove into interior design, spending evenings studying online tutorials and practicing sketches. Daniel was patient, critiquing my work with gentle honesty, pushing me to improve. To pay my share of the rent, I took a part-time job as a barista at a coffee shop near his apartment. The work was grueling, long shifts, rude customers, but it kept me independent. I refused to touch my savings unless I had to. I wanted to build this new life on my own terms, not on the scraps of what I'd given to Carol and Robert. By spring, I was getting the hang of design. Daniel landed a small project redecorating a local bookstore, and he brought me on as his assistant. We spent weekends picking out rugs, rearranging shelves, and painting walls. The owner loved our work, and I felt a spark of pride I hadn't known in years. That project led to another, a cafe needing a cozy vibe. I designed a corner nook with plush chairs and warm lighting, and when customers raved about it, Daniel grinned at me. "Told you you're a natural," he said. Those small wins gave me hope that I could make this work. But starting over wasn't all smooth sailing. I struggled with doubt, wondering if I'd made a mistake leaving my stable finance job. Money was tight, and I had to budget every dollar. Some nights I'd lie awake worrying I'd fail at design and end up with nothing. Daniel was always there, reminding me why I'd left. "You're not their ATM anymore," he'd say, squeezing my hand. "You're building something real." His belief in me kept me going. Meanwhile, I heard bits and pieces about my family through mutual friends. Without my financial support, Carol and Robert were struggling. Robert's job at the hardware store wasn't enough to cover their bills, and Carol had started picking up shifts at a grocery store. Lindsay, it turned out, couldn't keep up with the Tesla payments. She'd racked up debt trying to maintain her flashy lifestyle, and the car was repossessed a few months after I left. I felt a twinge of guilt when I heard that, but it passed quickly. They'd made their choices just like I'd made mine. Lindsay tried reaching out once, leaving a voicemail I didn't return. "Heather, we need to talk," she said, her voice clipped. I deleted it. I'd spent years giving her everything, and she'd thrown it back in my face. Carol and Robert sent a few texts too, asking me to come home or work things out. I blocked their numbers again. I wasn't going back to that house, to their lies and demands. Daniel supported me, saying I didn't owe them anything. "Focus on you," he'd tell me, and I did. As the months passed, I grew more confident. I started pitching my own design ideas to clients, landing a contract to refresh a small office space. It wasn't big, but it was mine. I spent hours perfecting the layout, choosing sleek desks and vibrant accent walls. When the client shook my hand and said, "This is exactly what we needed," I nearly cried. It was proof I could do this, proof I was more than the girl who'd given up everything for her family. Living with Daniel deepened our bond. We'd stay up late dreaming about opening our own design studio one day. He'd sketch wild ideas, and I'd rein them in with practical plans. We balanced each other, and I realized how lucky I was to have him. He wasn't just my boyfriend, he was my partner, my biggest cheerleader. For the first time, I let myself imagine a future that wasn't about sacrifice, a future where I could be happy. By the end of that first year on my own, I wasn't the same Heather who'd walked out of Carol and Robert's house. I was stronger, more sure of myself. I still had a long way to go, but I was building a life I was proud of. My family's struggles were their own now, and I refused to carry their weight anymore. I was ready for whatever came next, knowing I had Daniel by my side and a dream worth chasing. A year after I walked out of Carol and Robert's house, my life was unrecognizable. Living with Daniel in Memphis had given me the space to rebuild, to chase a future I'd never dared to dream of before. But one piece of unfinished business lingered: the $30,000 they'd taken from our joint account to buy Lindsay's Tesla. I couldn't let it go. That money was mine, earned through years of sacrifice, and I deserved justice. So I decided to take Carol and Robert to court. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman who listened to my story and didn't sugarcoat things. "It's a strong case," she told me, flipping through my bank statements. "The joint account was in your name, and you have proof of their withdrawal. We can argue financial misconduct." The process wasn't easy: gathering evidence, filing paperwork, sitting through tense meetings, but Daniel was by my side, keeping me grounded. He'd hold my hand during late-night prep sessions, reminding me I was fighting for what was right. The court date came that spring. Standing in the Memphis courthouse, I faced Carol and Robert across the room. They looked smaller than I remembered, their faces tight with worry. Lindsay wasn't there. She'd moved to Nashville, chasing some marketing job I'd heard. My lawyer laid out the facts: the joint account, my contributions, their unauthorized withdrawal for the Tesla. Carol tried to argue it was family money, but the bank records didn't lie. Robert stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. The judge didn't take long to decide. She ruled in my favor, ordering Carol and Robert to repay the full $30,000 plus legal fees. When the gavel came down, I felt a rush of relief. It wasn't just about the money, it was about holding them accountable. They'd taken so much from me, but I'd taken something back. The repayment came in installments, slow at first because Carol and Robert were struggling. Without my support, their finances had crumbled. Robert was still at the hardware store, barely making ends meet, and Carol's grocery store job wasn't enough. I heard through a cousin that Lindsay's Tesla was long gone, repossessed, when she couldn't keep up with the payments. Part of me felt a pang of sadness for their mess, but I'd learned my lesson: their problems weren't mine anymore. With the lawsuit behind me, I threw myself into my new life. My interior design work was taking off. After those first small projects with Daniel, the bookstore, the cafe, I landed a bigger contract redesigning a local boutique hotel. I poured my heart into it, choosing soft linens, warm wood tones, and elegant lighting that made the space feel alive. When the hotel owner praised my work at the grand opening, I stood taller, feeling like I'd finally found my place. Daniel and I started talking about launching our own design studio, a dream that felt closer every day. That summer, Daniel proposed. It wasn't a grand gesture, just the two of us on his apartment balcony, the Memphis skyline glowing in the distance. He pulled out a simple silver ring, his hand shaking a little. "Heather, you're my everything," he said. "Let's build our future together." I said yes before he could finish, tears streaming down my face. We planned a small wedding, just close friends and a few of Daniel's relatives. I didn't invite Carol, Robert, or Lindsay. They weren't part of my life anymore, and I was okay with that. The wedding was perfect, a sunny afternoon in a local garden with wildflowers and fairy lights. I wore a simple white dress, and Daniel looked at me like I was the only person in the world. As we exchanged vows, I promised to love him, to trust him, and to never let anyone take advantage of me again. When we kissed, our friends cheered, and I felt a joy I'd never known. For the first time, I wasn't defined by what I'd given up, but by what I'd built. Now looking back, I see how far I've come. Carol and Robert are still in Memphis scraping by, but I don't keep tabs on them. Lindsay's out there somewhere chasing her dreams, and I wish her well from a distance. I'm not the girl who gave up college to save her family anymore. I'm a designer, a wife, a woman who fought for her worth, and won. My life with Daniel isn't perfect, bills pile up, clients can be tough, but it's ours, built on love and respect. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this family isn't about who you're born to, it's about who stands by you. I spent years trying to earn Carol and Robert's love, thinking sacrifice would make me enough, but I was enough all along. Walking away was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it gave me the freedom to find myself. To anyone out there feeling trapped, giving everything and getting nothing back, I want you to know you deserve better. Fight for it. You're worth it.
My name is Viola Pastore, and I'm 29 years old. The night it all began, I thought I was standing at the threshold of forever. The backyard shimmered, like something out of a magazine spread. Strings of fairy lights wound through the branches of the old oak tree, glowing like bottled fireflies against the velvet summer sky. Music drifted softly over the murmur of laughter. Friends and family clustered in little groups, holding glasses of champagne, smiling, congratulating. The air carried the scent of grilled meat, expensive perfume, and blooming roses, a perfect concoction for celebration. It was my engagement party, mine and Antony's. I stood near the makeshift bar, a glass of white wine in my hand, watching him from across the yard. Antony was magnetic, always was. Tonight in the navy suit, I'd helped him choose. He looked every bit the man I thought I'd marry. He had that easy charm, the kind that made people lean closer when he spoke, laugh a little louder when he cracked a joke. My chest swelled with pride, with relief. After 5 years of fights and makeups, of late-night promises, whispered under blankets of compromises, big and small, we had made it here, to this glittering moment. My best friend Lena nudged me playfully. "You look like a woman who just won the lottery," she teased. I laughed, heat rushing to my cheeks. I feel like I did. What I didn't say, what I couldn't voice, even to her, was that tonight felt like proof. Proof that the struggles had been worth it, that the doubt and distance we'd sometimes battled were behind us. Proof that I hadn't wasted 5 years of my life on someone who might never settle down. I caught Antony's gaze across the crowd. He smiled briefly, but there was something tight about it, something that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then, with a subtle tilt of his head, he gestured toward the garden beyond the oak tree, a secret invitation. My heart leapt. I set my glass down and whispered to Lena, "Back in a minute." The music faded as I wove past laughing relatives and crossed under the canopy of lights. The garden was quieter, the shadows thicker. The roses along the fence perfumed the air with a heady sweetness. Antony waited there, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Hey," I said, softly stepping closer. "You okay? Everyone's having a great time. You're the star tonight." His eyes flickered restless. He didn't reach for me. Instead, he looked past me, at the half-bloomed rosebush jaw clenched. Silence stretched heavy and wrong. "Antony," my voice cracked. "Talk to me." He drew a sharp breath. "Viola, I'm having second thoughts." The words slammed into me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't even process them. My mind scrambled for a softer meaning. Cold feet, party nerves, some kind of temporary panic. I forced a laugh, though it caught in my throat. "It's overwhelming, I know," I said quickly. "We can sneak away soon, just you and me. No pressure. This party—" "No." His voice cut through mine, low and steady. Too steady. "Not about the party. About everything. Us. This." He gestured vaguely toward the glow of lights, the laughter, the life we had planned. My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "We planned this together." "Antony. We." Finally, he looked at me, and the coldness in his gaze stole the air from my lungs. It wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt. It was dismissal. Behind him, near the hydrangeas, I noticed 2 of his friends, Caleb and Jordan, hovering, pretending to examine the flowers, but very clearly listening. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a private moment. It was a stage. "You make it sound so final," I whispered, the betrayal already burning my throat. "That's because it feels final." His tone rose sharp enough for his friends to hear. "I don't know if I want final. I don't know if I want you." The world tilted. The fairy lights blurred into harsh streaks. My knees wobbled, but somehow I stayed upright. He wanted an audience. He wanted me small, desperate, humiliated. And for one terrible second, I almost gave it to him. The pleading words clawed at my throat. Don't do this. Please. But something inside me snapped. A colder, harder part of me rose up, refusing to let him script my downfall. I in-pastored, deeply steadying my voice. Okay, I said, my tone calm, eerily calm. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. I stepped back into the glow of the party, lifted a spoon, and tapped it against my glass. The chatter dimmed instantly. 100 expectant faces turned toward me. My parents, his parents, friends with wide eyes. Thank you all for coming tonight, I said, my voice carrying steady and clear. But it seems our celebration is premature. Antony has informed me that our engagement is off. Please enjoy the rest of the food and drinks. The silence that followed was absolute, crushing, electric. I felt Antony's eyes boring into my back, but I didn't flinch. For the first time all night, I could breathe. The betrayal was complete, but so was my dignity. Silence can be heavy. That night, when I walked into my apartment, it felt like the silence had weight pressing against my chest, suffocating. I dropped my clutch on the kitchen counter. The laughter, the music, the fairy lights, all of it had evaporated. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I wandered into the living room, but the sound felt hollow. The walls, which just yesterday had been canvases for our future, suddenly looked foreign, too white, too bare, too empty. I pulled the engagement ring from my finger. My hand trembled, but not from grief, from clarity. I set it gently on the coffee table like one might place a fragile piece of glassware and whispered to no one, it's over. For hours I sat in the dark replaying the night in my head. Antony's cold eyes, his staged performance, his friends watching like vultures. The urge to cry came and went in waves, but the tears never fell. What spilled instead was something sharper, anger, humiliation, a bitter cocktail that burned hotter than sorrow. By dawn, exhaustion gave way to determination. If Antony thought he could script my collapse, he was wrong. I would dismantle our future myself, brick by brick. The first call was to the venue, Ridgewood Events. This is Brenda. Hi, Brenda. This is Viola Pastore. We had October 15th booked. Oh, Viola. Yes, of course. Congratulations again. How can I need to cancel. My voice was steady, detached. A pause, then a softened tone. I see. I'm so sorry to hear that. We'll process the cancellation, the deposit. Forfeit it. I cut in. Please just consider it done. I ended the call before condolences could drip through the line. I didn't want pity. I wanted control. The caterer, the florist, the photographer, each conversation was the same polite, firm final. By mid-afternoon, our wedding plans had been reduced to a string of canceled contracts and forfeited deposits. With every call, I felt lighter, stronger. It was like pulling nails from a coffin I refused to lie in. Then came the pounding at my door. I knew it was him before I even looked. Antony. He stood in the hallway, disheveled but angry. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot. He pushed past me before I could say a word, pacing like a caged animal. You didn't have to humiliate me like that, he snapped. Canceling everything, announcing it to everyone. Do you know how dramatic you made it look? I shut the door slowly, leaning against it. Humiliate you? My voice was low, dangerous. You told me at our engagement party in front of your friends that you weren't sure you wanted me. What exactly did you expect, Antony? That I'd stand there smiling while you tore us apart. He raked a hand through his hair. Frustration flaring. It was a feeling, Viola, a moment of doubt. Everyone gets them. You didn't have to blow it up into what I cut him off. My anger, usually restrained, surged forward. Into the truth. Because that's all I did. I told the truth. You didn't want me, and I won't beg you to change your mind. For a flicker of a moment, I saw panic in his eyes. Not regret, not love. Panic because his script had gone off track. He expected tears, maybe pleading. Instead, he was facing a woman who had already walked away. You're so black and white, he muttered, shaking his head. No room for complexity, for messy emotions. Messy emotions, I laughed bitterly. You turned my life into a spectacle, Antony. That wasn't complexity. That was cruelty. He tried again, softer this time, his voice honeyed with false sincerity. I was scared. I needed reassurance. No! I straightened, stepping closer, close enough to see the faint stubble on his jaw, the stubborn set of his mouth. You needed an audience. You got one, and now you have to live with it. His jaw clenched. You'll regret this, he said finally. But the words sounded hollow, almost rehearsed. I opened the door wide. Get out. For a moment, he didn't move, as if testing whether I'd crack. Then he brushed past me, his cologne lingering in the air long after the door slammed behind him. I locked it, leaned my forehead against the cool wood, and expastored. My hands were shaking, but inside something solid was beginning to form. I walked back to the coffee table, picked up my phone, and one by one blocked his number, his social media, his email. Not out of spite, out of necessity. The silence returned, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. It was mine. The days after Antony left blurred together at first. Mornings bled into nights, nights into mornings. The apartment felt cavernous, like a house stripped of furniture. Every corner whispered reminders of him, the mug he always left in the sink, the throw blanket he used to hog the faint indentation on his side of the bed. But I refused to let grief devour me. Instead, I built rituals, anchors to tether me to the present. Coffee at dawn, a brisk run before work, a notebook on my nightstand where I dumped every raw thought, every jagged memory, until the pages bristled with inked confessions I'd never say aloud. At work, the pity came swiftly, hushed conversations that stilled when I entered the break room. Sideways glances heavy with unspoken questions. I mastered the art of deflection, forcing a smile. It's all good. Appreciate the concern. Then burying myself in projects that demanded precision, clean lines of code that never betrayed me. Lena, my best friend, never pried. Instead, she showed up with pizza and cheap wine, curled up on my couch, and let Netflix drone on while we demolished greasy slices. She never once said his name. That silence was the greatest kindness. Weeks stretched into months. Slowly, the sting dulled into a hum, a background ache I could carry. The gym became my sanctuary. Each drop of sweat was a purge. Each muscle ache was proof I was rebuilding piece by piece, stronger than before. Antony's name still floated around our social circles, but always secondhand. One evening at Lena's, she mentioned casually, "He's been seeing that musician girl. Leo's bandmate. What's her name again?" I raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't matter." A month later, Lena added with a smirk, "Didn't last. She bailed when he couldn't keep up with her gigs. Left him on red." I sipped my tea, feeling nothing. No triumph, no bitterness, just indifference. That was my first real victory. Not revenge in the dramatic sense, but the quiet kind. The kind where your absence speaks louder than any confrontation. But karma, I learned, has impeccable timing. At a bar one Friday, a mutual acquaintance cornered me. "Hey, Viola, I heard about Antony. Rough stuff, huh?" "What rough stuff?" I asked, feigning polite disinterest. "Word is his reputation's tanking. A lot of people thought the engagement party stunt was, well, messed up. His friends don't really want to be around him anymore. It's like he burned all his bridges at once." I stirred my drink, my face neutral. Inside, though, there was a flicker of something not joy exactly, but a grim satisfaction. The universe had sharper teeth than I ever could. That night, as I walked home under the city lights, a thought settled in my chest like a warm coal. I didn't need to destroy Antony. He was doing it to himself. My silence, my absence, my refusal to play his game, that was the quietest, sharpest revenge. And for the first time in months, I slept without waking in the dark, without reaching for a ghost. It started small. A text from an unknown number one evening while I was folding laundry. "Hey, it's Antony. I know I probably shouldn't text you, but I was just thinking about you. Hope you're okay." I stared at the screen for a moment. The words were casual, almost friendly, as if he hadn't gutted me in front of 100 witnesses, as if he hadn't tried to rewrite the story to make himself the victim. I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I simply deleted the message as though erasing a smudge from a mirror. Weeks later came a voicemail, his voice thick, desperate. "Viola, it's me. God, I made such a mistake. I was scared, okay?" Everything felt too much that night, and I panicked. "You were the only thing real in my life. Please, can we talk? Just 5 minutes." I listened once, then saved the message, not as a keepsake, as evidence, a receipt of the bullet I'd dodged. I played it back only once, studying the tremor in his tone like a scientist examining a specimen. The calls didn't stop, and when I refused to answer, he sent a proxy. One afternoon, my phone lit up with a number I recognized, but hadn't saved Chloe, one of his oldest friends. She'd been at the party, lingering near the hydrangeas, eyes hungry for drama. Against my better judgment, I answered. Viola, she said, skipping pleasantries, you need to stop being so stubborn. He's a wreck. He's sorry, okay? Don't you care what this is doing to him? I blinked momentarily, stunned by the audacity. Chloe Anthony ended our engagement at the party. In front of you, remember. That wasn't who he really is, she pressed. You know him. He's passionate. He messes up, sure, but you don't just throw 5 years away like that. I felt a cool calm settle over me, the same armor I'd worn the night of the party. You're right, Chloe. I don't throw 5 years away. He did. Silence on the line. I could almost hear her grinding her teeth. You're cold, she hissed. Heartless. After everything you two had, you can't give him another chance. My compassion isn't a leash for him to yank whenever he feels lonely. My voice didn't waver. His life is no longer my responsibility. Don't call me again on his behalf. Before she could reply, I ended the call. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, adrenaline buzzing under my skin. But instead of anger, I felt something sharper, cleaner. Power. Every no I delivered was another brick in the wall between us, another step away from the girl who almost begged in the garden that night. The next attempt was uglier. My phone lit up past midnight with a rapid-fire series of texts, each one more venomous than the last. Fine. Be that way. You were never emotionally available anyway. You're probably still alone and bitter in that empty apartment. I was right to leave. You're nothing but a black hole. I read them in order calmly, as though flipping through a stranger's diary. No tears, no trembling, just clarity. This was the real Antony. Not the charming man in a navy suit, not the boy who once whispered promises on a rain-soaked hike. This was the man who needed an audience for cruelty, who crumbled when denied control. I didn't block him. Not yet. Instead, I took a screenshot of the entire thread. One last piece of proof. Then I deleted it, all wiped clean. Lena asked me the next day if I ever thought about replying. No, I said, simply sipping my coffee, because silence is louder. And in that silence, I discovered a truth. The more he clawed at the past, the freer I became. By the time a full year had passed, Antony was nothing more than a shadow I no longer turned to chase. The texts had stopped, the calls had dried up, and even his proxies had grown silent. My life had become quieter, steadier, anchored by routines that made me feel whole again. It was during one of those routines in art class Lena convinced me to try that I met him. Thomas. He wasn't loud like Antony didn't command the room with flashy charm. Instead, he had a presence that felt grounded like oak roots buried deep into the soil. He noticed the details others overlooked, the way I gripped the charcoal pencil too tightly, how my shoulders tensed when the instructor mentioned expression. You're not supposed to wrestle it, he'd said with a smile, watching me fight the page. The lines will come if you let them. I rolled my eyes. Easy for you to say. Yours looks like an actual vase. Mine looks like a lopsided potato. He laughed, not unkindly, not mocking, just warm. And for the first time in a long while, I laughed with someone without checking for barbs hidden in the sound. Our friendship grew slowly, deliberately. Coffee after class, walks through the park, conversations about books, music, family. With Antony, everything had been urgency, grand gestures, sweeping declarations, fireworks that always burned out too fast. With Thomas, it was a quiet flame, steady and unpretentious. Months later, when he asked me to dinner, I realized my chest didn't tighten with dread or hesitation. It fluttered. Dating Thomas wasn't a performance. There were no curated spectacles, no audience to impress. Just us. We cooked together, burned pancakes together, fought over the right way to load the dishwasher, and somehow it felt more like love than all the glittering chaos Antony ever promised me. When Thomas proposed, it wasn't under fairy lights or in front of a crowd. It was on a hike, just the two of us, rain misting our hair as we stood at the peak. He held out a simple silver ring, his hand shaking. I don't need perfect, he said, voice low, almost trembling. I just need us, always us. And I said yes, without hesitation, without doubt, without fear. Our wedding was small, intimate. No performances, no lavish crowd. Just family, close friends, and vows whispered with a sincerity that made my throat ache. When Ellie was born a year later, everything shifted again. Her tiny fingers curled around mine with a strength that stunned me. She became the living, breathing proof that love didn't need spectacle to be real. Love could be soft, steady, unshakable. On Saturday mornings, Thomas and I would take her to the park. I'd push her gently in the swings, her laughter bubbling like music. Thomas would sit nearby, book in hand, but his eyes always lingering on us, protective, tender. Sometimes, in those quiet moments, a memory of Antony would flicker a cruel whisper in the garden, the sting of betrayal under fairy lights. But it felt like remembering a nightmare after waking in a sunlit room, a shadow that couldn't touch me anymore. And though I never sought it deep inside, I knew karma wasn't finished. One day the past would find its way back to me. And when it did, I'd be ready. The park had become our sanctuary. It was a crisp autumn morning. Sunlight dripping through the golden leaves, Ellie's laughter filling the air as I pushed her on the swing. Thomas sat nearby on a bench, a thermos of coffee in hand, watching us with that soft smile that still made my heart stumble. "Higher, Mama." Ellie squealed, her curls bouncing as the swing arced forward. "Hold tight, Peanut," I said, giving her a gentle push. Her joy was pure, unfiltered, contagious. I was so absorbed in her laughter that I didn't notice the stillness at first, that prickling awareness that someone's eyes were fixed on me. The hairs on my neck rose before I even turned. And then I saw him. Antony. He stood a few yards away on the gravel path, a takeaway coffee cup in one hand, his shoulders slightly hunched, as though the weight of years pressed down on them. His once sharp suit style was gone. Instead, he wore a rumpled jacket, his hair thinning his face etched with lines that hadn't been there before. For a moment, time telescoped. The fairy lights, the roses, the cruel smirk as he said, "He wasn't sure about me." It all flashed like a reel behind my eyes. He didn't move, just stared. At me, at Ellie, at the life that could have been his, had he not shattered it under the glow of party lights. Ellie noticed him first. She tilted her head curiously, her tiny voice piping, "Mama, who's that man?" I smiled gently, brushing a curl from her forehead. "No one you need to know, sweetheart." I lifted her from the swing and nestled her against my shoulder, her warmth grounding me. When I finally met Antony's gaze again, he had stepped closer, hesitant. His voice, when it came, trembled slightly. "Viola." I gave him the kind of polite, distant smile you'd offer an old neighbor you barely remembered. "Antony." His eyes flicked from my face to the ring on my finger, then to Ellie's hand clutching at my sweater. He swallowed hard. "She's beautiful." "She is." My voice was calm, firm. I didn't elaborate. Thomas stood, then slipping his arm naturally around my waist as he walked over. His presence was quiet, but undeniable, a steady claim, not a performance. "Ready to go, honey?" he asked, eyes only on me. "Yeah," I said, returning his warmth. "We're ready." Antony looked between us, his mask crumbling. I saw the truth in his eyes, regret sharp and bitter. Not the kind born from love, but from loss of control, from seeing me happy without him. I shifted Ellie higher on my hip and turned fully toward him. "Take care of yourself, Antony." It wasn't a blessing. It wasn't forgiveness. It was dismissal. He opened his mouth, maybe to plead, maybe to lash out, but no words came, only silence. And I turned my back on him, walking away with Thomas's hand warm on my back and Ellie's giggle in my ear. For the first time, the silence behind me felt like peace, not emptiness. We walked toward the car, the crunch of leaves under our feet, Ellie singing nonsense songs against my shoulder. Thomas squeezed my side, murmuring, "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said, and I meant it. I didn't glance back, but I didn't need to. I could feel Antony still standing there, a solitary figure in the park, watching the life he'd thrown away bloom in front of him. Once his absence had felt like a wound that might never close. Now it was just a scar, faded, painless, a reminder of the fire I'd walked through. The greatest revenge was never anger or vengeance. It wasn't slamming doors or screaming matches. It was silence, indifference, building a life so full, so steady that the ghosts of the past couldn't touch it. That night, after Ellie fell asleep and Thomas wrapped his arms around me on the couch, I let myself think about Antony for the last time. Not with longing, not with bitterness, just acknowledgement. He was a chapter, nothing more. A story I'd outgrown. I closed my eyes, breathing in the warmth of my family, and felt an overwhelming peace. The girl who once stood under fairy lights, shattered and humiliated, was gone. In her place was a woman who had rebuilt, who had chosen love without spectacle, who had learned that dignity was its own kind of armor. And as I drifted to sleep, I knew with certainty that chapter was closed. Forever. Because my story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about love, about strength, about the quiet, extraordinary joy of moving on.